the recorded session under live session view video. So week 2, digital film lighting, is going to cover, we're going to start talking about 3-point lighting, and we're going to talk about it in a number of contexts. So it is only Tuesday of week 2, so I don't expect you to have gotten very far into the reading yet for the week, but if I just pop over to the read and view, this week is entitled Seeing Light, and we've got your reading links already set up for you. And there's some basic questions that we're trying to address this week, and look for these cues in the reading and see if you can determine what we, and that's the collective we, is in terms of the the creative filmmakers with a specific concern for lighting. What are we expecting our lighting to do for us? There are a number of things that lighting can do. I'm a big advocate of the concept of nonverbal communication through the use of creative lighting in motion pictures to reinforce story concepts, to reinforce prevailing themes in a film, and also to help support the tone of a specific scene. For instance, what feelings do we get from lighting that represents horror concepts or drama concepts, and does the lighting take shape and change depending on the tone of the material we're shooting? We're going to talk about adding shape, depth, and dimension to a scene or to a subject. And the key thing to remember is that filmmaking, whether you're using photochemical film stock or whether you're using digital capture technology, we're still dealing with a two-dimensional medium and a three-dimensional and rendering a three-dimensional reality, and so we are constantly looking for ways to emphasize that three-dimensional quality about our subjects under the limitations of a 2D world, like a digital file or a piece of film. We're going to talk about the lighting process. We're going to look for ways to first, we're going to learn the basic process, and then we're going to look for ways to improve our efficiency. How to work fast, in other words. How to arrive at a lighting solution in a timely and economic time frame, so that our lighting is not only creative, but it is fundamentally supportive of the budget of the film, whatever category you're working under, whether it's low budget television or major productions like feature films. So we're going to address the fundamentals. We're going to address the qualities of light, their color, in other words, intensity, volume, and the, how should we put it, the qualities of our light relative to contrast, for instance, the hardness or softness of light, and how it's projected, and then some other qualities that we'll look at, ways in which we can modify hardness or softness, types of equipment that's available, and so forth to help us render these results. So we're going to have you do that reading, and then there's a number of videos here for you to take a look at. None of them are particularly lengthy, but I do have a 3-point lighting demonstration that I'll perform for you. It's in 4 parts, so you can sort of break it up over a couple of different sittings if you have to, where I'm going to basically go through the 3-point lighting approach with you with a subject. And we're working on stage, and we have a variety of different lights, and you'll get to see what those lights are doing. And I'll discuss with you my thought process and the results or the qualities that I'm looking for in terms of my light output from each fixture that I choose. And then from my basic hard light setup, I'll start modifying it for you and using different fixtures to achieve similar results, or I'll talk to you about how I desire to modify the result and what types of equipment or effects that I will use to transform the lighting from one look to the next. And so that's a 4-part section here. And then we got a quick video on things to remember, particularly when you're on location. Just little handy tips for you to remember when you're working on the lighting crew of a film, and then some brief points from Video Maker magazine. One of my close working relationships. They have a nice video here as well about 3-point lighting and working on location. Take a quick look at that. Again, none of these are very long, but they'll give you a little bit of added dimension, give you a break from some of the reading, and I hope you enjoy those. And if you have any suggestions about videos you'd like to see in the future, let me know. In the startup section, which you should have seen during week 1, there's supplementary videos on YouTube where you can find each of the videos I just described to you there, as well as other videos on other concepts from the lighting classes. And you can check those out. Just click the supplementary videos assignment in startups, and there's a link for you there. So just like last week, you got your read and view. Then we'll have a 3-point lighting discussion, which is over here, where you'll do a little bit of this 3-point lighting and offer up something for critique during your weekly discussion. And you'll talk about your results with your colleagues, look at the results from others in your class, and hopefully have a productive conversation about motivation, about technique, and about ways that we can improve our lighting. I recommend that you download the instructions, because it's always good for you to have a printout of what your objectives are, what's expected of your assignment, and what you should be submitting, and probably some key points to consider while you're going about demonstrating or performing your assignment. And if you want to practice this week, I got a neat little application that I've put under additional resources under week 2. And it is an application called Virtual Studio, and it's by the company Zvork. I don't know what that means, and I'm not even going to try to figure it out, but the link is here, Zvork, and it's a French internet website, so it's pretty interesting. But it looks like this when you open up the homepage, Virtual Lighting Studio by Zvork, and it's going to allow you to practice on some virtual models in blackspace. So if I press start here, that was quick. What we have is a virtual studio. So we've got a bald white guy, we've got a white guy with hair, we have a female version, Caucasian, and then we have, as an excellent exercise, we have a person of color, a male person of color. And what I'd like you to do is, once you are comfortable lighting your own, I hope one of these is close to your own ethnicity, try lighting a person of color, because you're going to find that the ways in which the light maps itself onto an individual with a lower skin reflectivity is going to alter the choices that you make in terms of your lighting. I think this is a great opportunity for you to practice lighting with a little bit of diversity in mind, because we do approach people of color with a slightly different lighting style than we would people with a high skin reflectivity, like this person here, who seems to reflect back a lot of the values that we're trying to map onto him with our fixtures. There's a little overhead view in 3D space of your virtual studio, and you can apply your lights. They're down here on the bottom. You get up to 6 of them in one scenario, and as you move your lights around in space, you're going to get some data in here that's going to show you what your results are going to look like when you click off of the lighting diagram and back onto your virtual character. So if I, let's see, if I want to move this light, I have ways of moving it around the clock. And in week 3, you're going to do an assignment called the shot clock, where you're going to do exactly that. You're going to move your lights around in space around your subject and see what the variations are as that fixture moves in space. And see if I can get it to go all the way around. I don't know if I can. I guess I got to go back the other way. But you can position these lights any way that you want. If this is the first light that I set, you'll find in your readings that the key light is often the first light that we set, and we put it in a position roughly 45 degrees off camera axis, lens axis from the subject. Let's call that here. And I can back this light up in space, and I can do things like I can gel it with diffusion or color, which is kind of neat. Put a little something there, and let's see what that rendered. Okay, so there's our key light right now. That's kind of interesting. I can change the intensity by making it brighter to the point where it just blows out, and it's giving you the exposure values. In other words, the compensation over a natural exposure or normal exposure in terms of over and under. So you got plus 2.5 EV would be 2.5 stops over your shooting f-stop, or what we call your key stop. And we can also darken that back up till we have a nice sense of the intensity of our key light. I call it weight because it's going to compare directly to its fill component, which would be our second light, our fill light. And right now we can see that it's way too bright, and let's see where it's positioned. It's positioned right in front of our subject. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to back that puppy up at least the same distance as the key light, maybe further. Let's try to go a little, see if I can go further. I think that might be it. Let's see. Oh, there we go. And let's move it around to and position opposite our key light. So if our key light's 45 degrees off the lens axis to the left, or camera left, we would put our fill light on the camera right side in the opposite or complementary angle, another 45 degrees. So this resulting large angle is actually 90 degrees if you take a look at that, those vectors. And we're going to reduce this in intensity to at least half of what the key is doing. So let's go -1 stop would be a reduction of 50%. Let's see what that looks like. And we start getting a feeling of a darker side and a brighter side. That's pretty good. I still think it's way too intense. So what we can do is, rather than continue looking at our overhead, is just dial down the intensity from our controls and take a look at, now you get a sense of why I call this weight, because how much weight does the key side have versus the fill side? And I generally like there to be a strong difference between the two. This is getting there. I might go a little further for a dramatic look if I'm lighting drama, let's say. And that's starting to look kind of interesting. And then what the other component of a basic three-point lighting setup would be some kind of an edge light. So I'm going to add one over here. And again, we got to look at where they place that in space. And again, they put it right in front of our subject. So we'll start by backing that puppy up. Come on. A little bit more. I'll start moving it around because I want to put it around the back side. So let's see. See if I can get it to back up any more. That might be That might be my bandwidth just reacting real slow. But let's see what we got out of that. And that's kind of interesting. There's what we call an edge light or a cheeker, and it provides separation of the subject's profile from the background. If this was busy back here and there was a lot of detail, it'd be harder to discern where the subject's leading edges fall off and the background begins. So we put a liner, we call it, or an edge light on our subject to define it clearly against the background. The key side generally doesn't need one, but we could add one if we wanted additional liner on this shoulder for some reason. We could add a fourth light, and we could place this opposite of our cheeker. So we could place it on the camera left side. And we'll back it up some. And we'll keep going around, and we'll let's see. I'm going to dial our cheeker down just a tad, I think. Let's take a look here. Well, there's our liner now. You can see by turning off light number 4 what we added to the whole process. It's not doing much up here on the key side, but it is definitely separating his right shoulder from the background. And this is a complex 4-light build, but nevertheless, you can experiment with all of this before you even have to drag your lighting kit out. So that's what I think makes this this software kind of fun. Virtual Lighting Studio by Zvork, and the link is in your additional resources or supplementary resources section. Where did I put that? There it is. Okay. Additional resources section at the bottom of section 2. And your links are here. So I think that's kind of fun. You can do that before you attempt your actual assignment if you want to get a little practice in first. But I think what's really important is understanding the proximity of all of these lights to your subject. And it should give you a really clear idea of how much room you're going to need to maneuver and set up equipment when you actually do your 3-point lighting setups. And then if you want to see what each light is doing, remember number 1 was our key light. It provided shape, texture, and color. There it was. Our second light is our fill light that controls our contrast by raising or lowering the shadow side of our subject to a comfortable point that we find either visually attractive or suitable to the script in some way. If it was a horror movie, I might go without the fill altogether. But since it's drama, I'll probably put a little fill in there, and then we can experiment what our edges look like. This is what we would call a hot side wrap or a hot side cheeker. And then this is a traditional cheeker on the camera right side or the subject left side, which is providing separation on the fill side of our subject, and then that's both edges on, and that's our finished look. So it's kind of fun. And once you get something like this built, you can say, well, what if he had hair? What would he look like with hair? And sometimes that changes the quality of your edge light, and you might want to see, oh, okay. So when he's got hair, we might want to beef one of these edges up a little bit. So we might go to our controls, and we might just start bumping up that edge light to see if we can get any read to start coming up here in the darkness of his hair. And if it doesn't read the way we want, we're starting to get some artifacting here, we can try adding another light and see if that helps our situation. So it's a lot of fun. Of course, what would it look like if he was a girl? And from this setup, we can see that we've got a lot of work to do. The lighting that we did for our guy in virtual space is really not suitable for our girl at all. It's really over the top. So we might take down our edge lights considerably. And we might do something like add a little warming gel to our key light perhaps. We may also lower the intensity of that, and we may balance the intensity of our key with our fill to get it a little bit more in line with a feminine feel. In other words, not so hard, not so contrasty. That's something we can do to guys a lot more liberally than we can to ladies on a film set. And then let's see how it would look on our gentleman of color. Okay. That's kind of weird. There we go. Okay, and let's see, we can beef his key back up a little bit. That's not bad though. Looks like his cheeker can be maybe a little spicier, and probably the same with his hot side. We make them equal. That's fairly balanced, and then the fill, we can take it up or we can take it down. All depends on the context of your story. Kind of like that if it was a, say, a cop show maybe or something. So that's Virtual Lighting Studio. So I hope you enjoy that. Give it a shot, see what you think. And that's going to lead us to our discussion for the week, which hopefully you'll get your initial post in by tomorrow night, or as soon as you can after tomorrow night. And that's where you're going to post your results from your own three-point lighting experiment, and talk about it with your colleagues, and see if we can get a productive roundtable discussion going on the concepts of three-point lighting. Because later in the week, our project, Seeing Light, is going to involve analyzing an existing film. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to pick a scene from our, presumably our favorite film or television show, and then we're going to grab a screen grab if that's possible. If you can find clips of your favorite programming on YouTube, grab a screen grab, download the Project 2 worksheet, which looks like this. You're going to import your image, your source image here, which is from your favorite film. And then you're going to analyze that light and try to tell me as best you can where you think the key light is coming from. Is it a hard light or a soft light? Does it have color added? What is the color balance? And you're going to do a little diagram over here using the Hollywood Shot Designer from Section 1. And we're going to drop in your image from your three-point lighting trial and see how it compares to what you've got from your actual film. And then we're going to ask you, for instance, how many bulbs did you have on in your key light softbox, for instance? How many bulbs were on in your fill light? Did you use a backlight? If so, did you use the 65-watt bulb, or have you put a smaller or larger bulb in there to compensate? Any other lighting fixtures in the scene, what your total wattage was, calculate your load like you did in week 1, and then just give us some basic camera specs as well. What was your aperture, ISO, focal length, color temperature setting, date and time of the shoot, and then distance from subject, and what your source film was and who that cinematographer was. So if you pick, say, The Revenant, you would put Revenant here, and then you would put the cinematographer Emmanuel Lubetsky right here. And that's pretty much it. So you've got your lighting diagram from your sample image, and then your lighting diagram from your three-point lighting trial here. So 2 diagrams, 2 thumbnails, and some basic information there. And that's your week 2 project. So in a nutshell, that's your week 2 experience here. And go back to the front page. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them here, or you can save them until you've had a chance to give this stuff a try. And that's it. That's our week 2 agenda. And now I'll open the floor for questions at this time. What do you think, Heather?
I'm pretty good. I understand what I mean, the only question I would have is on Too Fast and Too Furious.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of my. I just want to know, like, how was the experience working on that?
Oh man, Too Fast and Too Furious. I think we did that in the last quarter of 2003, 2002. Might have been 2002. It was pretty intense. Too Fast and Too Furious. I had just gotten off of Bad Boys 2. I was the second unit gaffer on Bad Boys 2 down in Miami. And the folks at Too Fast and Too Furious were building an enormous crew that summer. And they had several units shooting at once. They had an action unit that was doing all the car stunts, the jumps, and the intense footage from some of the car chases. And then we had a second unit that was picking up shots from the first unit, and the first unit which was handling the lion's share of the principal photography. I was asked to, when I say rig a movie, that means do the lighting for the movie in advance of the shooting crew, because on a major feature film there's so much going on that there's no way that the crew can build the equipment setups necessary for each day's work on the same day that they report for work. So what they asked me to do for Too Fast and Too Furious was run ahead of the schedule of the shooting crew and build the lighting setups in advance, wherever they were going to be. I would be there anywhere from a day before to a month before to build whatever was required of the shooting schedule, and then as the shooting crew moved into that lighting situation, I would then jump back to where they had been previously, gather up that gear and anything that I needed, and then I would move on to my next assignment, trying to stay ahead of the shooting crew. So it was incredibly intense. That movie at that time, well, it wasn't the biggest film that I had ever been on, and when I say big, I mean $117 million operating budget. Well, it wasn't the biggest film I'd ever been on. It was certainly the most pressure I had ever felt. The absolute most pressure I'd ever felt. I was, I was 36 years old at the time. I was basically in the prime of my career. I was certainly experienced enough to handle it, smart enough and capable, and yet every day I felt tested to the absolute max. I studied every night my notes and my Tech Scout notes and notes that I got from the director of photography and from the director and from the chief lighting technician on the shooting crew, objectives that they had in mind, tone and feeling that they wanted from the lighting, equipment lists, and so forth. And I had to build it, and I had to build it on time and on budget, in such a way that there was really very little room for error, and it was very stressful. I often questioned my own sanity and my own quality, but we all pulled through. I had a really good crew who worked their butts off, and I think we gave them everything they asked for under a tumultuous schedule, and it all worked out for the best. We came in on budget, more or less, And at the end of that movie, I remember feeling like I had truly been tested for the first time in my career. And at that point, I had been in the business for about uh, 18 years. Uh, and I felt like there wasn't anything that they could do to me ever again that would torture me as badly as that movie did, and that coming through it the way we all did, I felt like I could do anything at that point. My confidence was really high after that film, and it we all rose to that occasion. Every feature film that you're on places demands on you. It asks more of you sometimes than you think you're capable of giving. Some people don't measure up to those challenges, and some people do. And when you do, it's very empowering. And when you don't, it's very informative. It allows you, or it gives you a sense of what your limitations are. And fortunately for me, I survived that process, and came out the other side in a different position in my career with a better reputation and um, a I made a name for myself, and I was able to transfer. That's when I elected to move from the East Coast to the West Coast and ride a little bit of that success out into LA. And as a result of that, I got a number of opportunities um, that I probably wouldn't have gotten had I not passed that crucible in Miami. So it was one of the best experiences of my career, no doubt. I enjoyed working on it. I enjoyed meeting all the characters. They were a lot of fun to work with. Everybody was really intense because it was an intense topic, and there was a lot of action, and there was a lot of, man, there was some cars on that movie that were $250,000 um, rebuilds on top of, for instance, we had a custom carbon fiber Lamborghini that car probably $200,000 off the showroom floor, and it had another $250,000 worth of mods attached to that. So that was, anything from that to a custom built little, Honda Civic with nitrous oxide and neon and uh, chromed out parts and everything. So we had the full gamut of actual functioning cars on that film as well, which made it really exciting. And everybody in Miami knew about it, so we had hundreds of extras every night, and then we had hundreds more that were just kind of hanging out watching the whole process. So it felt a little bit like a rock star in my own right at that point. So it was a lot of fun. It's hard to describe the experience in ample terms, but it was a lot of fun. I always
And
I always hope that someone in one of my classes um, will. I hope that everybody can. Unfortunately, that's not how the world works. But I wait and I listen on all of the grapevines to hear of when my students get to do things like that, because that's kind of that's like having a really good golf game. Uh, you're you're in top form, and you go out and you have a really good round of golf, and that's the thing that keeps you coming back for more. So um, I would definitely say, shoot for those experiences if it's at all possible. Study hard, because you've got to really be on your game to get an opportunity like that, but it is possible. Um, and so I hope for those experiences for my students as well, because you can't beat it.
yeah, I would.
I'm sorry, you broke up, Heather. What was that?
I said I hope I can work on something like that one day.
Well, you will. Study hard. Oh, hi, Michael. How you doing? There he is. He's coming in late, but better
That's the
late than
first
never.
film that you worked on. That one you was just trying to explain a little bit.
Uh-huh. That was Too
Is
Fast
that
and Too
is
Furious.
that your first one? Hey, that's awesome, man. That sounds real dope.
That was the second one in the series. I guess they've got what, 7 now?
No, they
So,
had 8.
oh God, they had 8. That's right. They did finish that. So, yeah. So I was on the second version. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. I would say, it's a good idea if you want to find yourself at that level in Hollywood. The only way to do it is to go to the mountain, because the mountain won't come to you. So when you graduate from LA Film School, make your plans to start moving to a major production market. And there's a number of them now. You don't have to go to Los Angeles anymore. You can. New York City is kind of, it goes through cycles of boom and bust economy in terms of filmmaking, and right now New York is pretty booming in terms of productions that are going on each season. You know, spring, summer, and fall are the production seasons in New York and on the East Coast, and so you've got New York, you've got Atlanta now, which has a fairly burgeoning market. And then, of course, the brass ring is Hollywood. Los Angeles is usually everybody's idea of the Mecca. Even outside the country, the foreign filmmakers, they all have a certain reverence for Hollywood. So I think if you're inclined to do it, the sooner the better, the younger the better, because if you can get your contacts made and you can secure a position for yourself out there economically and find work, that the longer you are in a market like that, the more contacts you'll make, the more opportunities will come your way, and before long you'll find yourself well on the way to a rewarding career that you might arrive at sooner than you would trying to get things done in your hometown if there's no movie industry to speak of where you're currently living. Where are you guys, by the way? Where do you live?
New Jersey.
Jersey. So you're right down the turnpike from New York. That'd actually be a pretty easy transition, I would think.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes outside of the city where I live.
Oh, beautiful. You can commute. New York is a great market for features. It's got a little bit different feel than Los Angeles. But it's quietly a very intense market. I think Los Angeles gets a lot of the flashy press, and everybody always wants to talk about what's going on in LA and who's working in LA, and New York is kind of quietly grinding it out. And if you ask me, the quality of work being done in New York is at least as good as what's done in Hollywood. But it's a different kind of a market. And living as close as you do to the city, you probably understand what I'm saying. It's just, the lifestyle is different.
It's just a different.
Yeah, yeah. It's, but gosh, I mean, of all of the places I've been, I think New York City was one of the few places that you could just stand out on your balcony and look out over the city and just feel the energy. Just know that it's out there waiting, you know. You don't get that in many places, but New York was definitely a strong sense of possibility there. I love New York City. Where are you working out of right now, Michael?
Hello. I'm in New Mexico, but Long Beach is my home.
Ah, okay. Well, you know, you've got studios right downtown in Albuquerque.
Yeah, but I'm coming back home, man. I'm going back to LA.
Sure, that's cool.
I'm more used to LA stuff. They got a lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah,
It's real
yeah,
pretty out here, though. I'm like the real prettiness stuff, you know.
yeah. I like Albuquerque a lot. You know, they did, I think, 2 installments of the Terminator franchise out there in Albuquerque. They've done a few big budget films out there. They built those brand new studios downtown in Albuquerque, and it drew a lot of work. I'd say starting about 6 years, 7 years ago, maybe, and right up until recently. Haven't heard of much going on in Albuquerque recently, but you know, it's cyclical, and they've got the production facilities there now, so you never know.
They're doing a couple of sitcoms
Ah,
out there in Albuquerque now, right now.
have you ever approached any folks out there at those studios to try and get some PA work, or just to hang out and watch?
No, I ain't done nothing like that
You got to
right
go
now.
check it out. You got to check it out. See if you can rub some of that stardust off on you. It's a good
And maybe
time.
Coyote Ugly. That's what inspired me to want to do the filming.
Coyote Ugly?
Yeah, I was an extra on that. It was pretty dope.
Were you?
That's kind of what inspired me
Well,
to even want
I'll tell you
to do this
what.
stuff. Yeah.
That Coyote Ugly is an interesting film because that director of photography was Amir Mokri, and he is one heck of a talented director of photography. He did a really
Yeah, I stood by that dude a little bit. Like,
did you? Was he smoking cigars
it was still cool, you know.
back then?
No, I want to say yeah, but but the film industry is real cool. You know what I'm saying? There's so
Yeah,
much going on.
yeah.
I was kind of trapped up in the glitz and glamour of it. I didn't realize that I was standing.
Well, I'll tell
I didn't
you.
know that. I was like, hey, that's the cameraman. It was still dope though.
That Amir Mokri was my boss on Bad Boys 2, so that's where we finally got to meet. So yeah,
And
he's very
that's pretty cool though.
intense.
You worked in there with the camera.
Yeah, yeah. I was on the lighting crew. I was his second unit gaffer on Bad Boys 2. So I had to work with the second unit director of photography, Mitch Amundsen, who went on to shoot the first couple Transformer movies. And so every day we would get a list of shots that the first unit couldn't complete, and we would go off with our crew and we would reassemble those lighting setups and take a look at the dailies to see what they had gotten shot and what they needed to assemble the edit. And that's called our assignments were called a pickup list. So there'd be a series of shots like an insert of Will Smith's hand on a video camera, or an insert of Martin Lawrence crawling through the attic, or a shot from the nightclub that they weren't able to get the girl swallowing the ecstasy pill, or we would get these shots and we would have to recreate them with our own gear and our own crew in a different time schedule than the first unit. So that was pretty interesting. So I got to match a lot of Amir's work in Bad Boys 2. So there's quite a bit of my lighting in there.
Well, it's an honor to learn from you, Trey.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope that I can give you guys some helpful information, some usable skills that you can take with you, so that when you have your own stories to tell, you'll be successful. So it's my
Thank you
pleasure,
very much.
my pleasure to be working with you. So Michael, since you joined us a little behind schedule, did you have any questions or concerns from the week's work that you wanted to work out here at the go-to?
Well, kind of. See, I don't have timing, so I didn't know really what to do about that.
You don't have, I'm sorry, you dropped out. You don't have,
See, I don't have access to the power box.
oh, that's
So
right.
I stay with a friend right now.
That's right. That's right. So your friend, what is your friend in an apartment and you just don't have a breaker panel?
Yeah, there's no access to it. I don't.
Okay.
It's off the. I think off the property or something like that.
Oh, it wouldn't be off the property. That would be against code. It's probably in the basement of your apartment building, or maybe it's outside in a locked box or something. Is there a superintendent that you can talk to that can at least show you where the breakers are and maybe show you the panel long enough for you to get a couple of pictures
Yeah,
of
you
it?
know what? I'll look. Yeah, I'll try that tomorrow.
Give that a,
I'll just take a lesser grade if I'm still able to turn it in.
yeah, no, I see what you're up against now.
I
So
didn't want to ask.
yeah, I see what you're up against. So I'll give you a little extra time to locate the superintendent and see if he can just give you brief access to it. All you really need is enough time to photograph the breaker panel and identify the circuit protection for your apartment and what the breaker values are, so you can plug all that information into the worksheet. The rest of it should be fairly self-explanatory. But keep me posted on that, and if you can't reach the superintendent for some reason, we'll figure out an alternative assignment for you for this week.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's all I've got for you this week. I've got another go-to session for another class starting in just under 10 minutes. If there's no other questions that I can address for you, then I will move to adjourn our meeting for this week.
God bless you, Mr. Teacher.
All right, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. So Heather and Michael, thank you so much for joining me this week. And if you have any questions about anything that I discussed, and Michael, if you missed a portion of this, just look for the reviewed video. Probably by Thursday lunchtime. I need to compress it and work with it a little bit before I can upload it to YouTube. So look for that video in about a day and a half. Okay.
That's cool.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Later.
Have a good night.